Okay, good morning, colleagues. I think we need to put our headphones on, if that's okay. Thank you so much. So thank you for coming along this morning. We've got a session on workforce. We've got some fantastic presenters for you. We've got Paul Johnson, who's going to take us through challenges and opportunities from a local authority's perspective. We've got Tracy Harrison, who's going to take us through workforce and quality from a housing perspective. Lisa's going to talk to us from a supplier perspective about workforce and how we support them. And then we've got Samantha, who's going to take us through one of the programs that's running across the country, which is the Virtual House. So just for myself, morning everyone, my name's Fiona Brown. I'm an associate with North East ADAS, and I'm also a member of the TSA board. And it's fantastic to see so many people bright and early, considering we had the gala dinner last night. So thank you very much for the effort. So just a little bit of background about the North East and North Cumbria, if I may. So we are one of the largest of the 42 ICSs in the country, with a population of 3.2 million. That's divided into 4 partnership areas, and we're in a really fortunate position in the North East, I think, where we've got some really strong partnerships with our health colleagues. So we're fortunate that 2 of their priorities are actually 2 of the ADAS priorities as well, around digital and around workforce, which makes it really much more powerful for us to work together. In terms of challenges and constraints for the North East, and from a social care perspective, I'm sure some of these on the screen are familiar to you in whichever setting you're in. We've got constraints around funding. We've got demographic changes, which is leading to a high level of demand. We've got a high number of unpaid carers who do an absolutely amazing job for families in the communities for us. We have market risks and fragility, which is well rehearsed again nationally, but also for the region. But also for us within the North East and North Cumbria, we have particular challenges around workforce, and that's around recruitment and retention. And I'll come on to that a little bit later, but it's particularly in the younger age group, trying to make social care a career for people of a younger age group is giving us some challenges. So given those constraints or those challenges, where are we within the North East? Well, we understand massively that we need to have a strength-based case for investment. We appreciate we won't meet current and predicted demand with the existing base model we've got. We're already spending 1.1 billion per annum on adult social care services in the North East, and that is a very small proportion of the population who actually receive services from social care. So there is still a large number of people in our communities who either need help and are getting it somewhere else, or actually are not getting the help that they need. But we do have some significant assets. We've got economic assets, we've got businesses, we've got workforce that make us important to the region's future economic strategy. So currently we contribute 2.5 billion to the economy. However, we are sometimes seen as a deficit. We're seen as a cost centre within the region, rather than perhaps an opportunity to support the economy. But we know we need to invest. We see technology, housing solutions, supporting our workforce and unpaid carers to help us deliver a better value vision for adult social care. Just a little bit of context about the workforce then. We appreciate we have no national workforce strategy for adult social care in this country, although we employ over 1.6 million people in comparison to 1.4 employed by the NHS. Size and structure in the North East, we have around 600 organisations which provide care to over 1,900 locations. So that may be in someone's home, maybe in a day centre, residential care setting. So a really large geographical footprint for us. Our vacancy rates increased by 50% in 1 year, and that's the highest it's been in 6 years. Our turnover rate is round about 26%. That is high, but unfortunately that is consistent. It's something we've seen over a number of years. And our workforce is predominantly ageing. So our average age is 44, and 34% of our registered managers are aged 55 and over. So we've got quite an ageing workforce in the North East. And the greatest pressure in recruitment and retention, as I've said, are those younger age group. So how have we tried to respond as a region then? As the 12 local authority areas, we've made a commitment. We've funded a programme of support over 2 years where we will look to work collaboratively. We've got a regional recruitment programme running for the next 12 months. And we've also developed a number of care academies. Some of those are standalone in local authorities, some of those are joint with health partners, maybe hosted by a foundation trust, and we've worked really hard to offer opportunities for secondment, work placements across the health and social care landscape to try and make sure that people are aware fully of what opportunities exist for them. And we do appreciate that the more investment we give to our workforce, the more likely they are to stay with us. 53% of our direct care providing staff are working towards the care certificate, and that the investment in training leads to a likelihood of more people staying with their employer. But we do need to recruit younger age group. We see a younger age group coming through school now who perhaps have never used a pen and paper in their education. It's all online, it's all IT. In the region, only 40% of our providers have a digital social care record. So we're putting young people who have come from an education system into an environment which is very paper-based. So we're working really hard to support providers and to support our young people to make sure that we can marry the two together. So our vision for workforce in the North East, one that's really important for us today, I think in today's context, is that to ensure the effective use of technology and digital opportunities to effectively support the increasing demand for services. And we're not saying that digital is the panacea and we can do away with individuals providing care. We see it very much as an offer or a solution that perhaps could blend care and make it more appropriate for people. So one solution that we've tried in the North East is the virtual house, and Samantha will take us through that later in the session. We have 10 of the 12 local authorities in the region have signed up to that. We set ourselves a target of 500 frontline staff to go through that e-learning platform. We're currently at about 742. We've just linked in with our principal social worker network, and we've also worked with our workforce and our performance network to make sure that people are aware of what we're trying to do with that solution. We looked at that platform as actually doing something once. We did a survey with our staff, and only 25% of them said they were confident in either using digital or actually talking to family and friend about digital as part of a care package, or referring people into digital pathways. So we knew we had a big piece of work to do in the region. All 12 local authorities had that problem, so we came together and said, can we do it once rather than doing it 12 times? Hence why we signed up as a region to the virtual house. We've also just recently received funding from the ICS, and we've also working with 5 housing providers across the region, so we can test out across health, housing and social care a platform that just makes it more visible to people what solutions are available with technology. So our next steps, we're busy moving people through that platform. As I say, we're around about 742. We're going to do a business case by the end of June to take back to the branch, to the directors of the region, to see if we take that forward into next year. We've got some future learning with Virtual House. We'd like to see that e-learning platform integrated with the local authorities e-learning platform so it's not separate. We'd like to explore how we actually use the Virtual House as part of the care assessment for our social worker and occupational therapy staff in the region. And we'd also like to understand how we could actually use some immersive training for people with complex behaviours, perhaps again in the Virtual House. We know we need targeted learning not only for basic skills but for leadership skills, so we're working with TSA to see how we can develop that. And we're also in discussions with the ICS around if we use the virtual house, does that give us a single platform where we all understand risk and can take positive risks using technology and working with families. And we're trying to build that into an offer, into a market position statement with our CQC providers, so we have a digital maturity offer, and the virtual house might be one element that we can offer to providers to actually use on a day-to-day basis. So thank you very much for your attention. If I can introduce Paul Johnson, who's going to take us through his presentation on challenges and opportunities for the local authority, and then we'll come into questions at the end of the session. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, Paul.
Morning, everyone. My name is Paul Johnson. I'm an independent consultant working with West Midlands ADAS to design and deliver their regional improvement programme. And I apologise, it's another Northeast accent, but I am going to be talking about a West Midlands perspective in the next section. So just a little bit about West Midlands ADAS. We represent the 14 councils with social services responsibilities in the West Midlands. And whilst the statutory duties and local delivery plans for adult social care sit with each council individually, directors also work on their shared priorities through the region's improvement plan. And this gives councils the ability to tackle multiple issues concurrently, to rapidly share learning and to implement improvements at scale, which in a technologically enabled environment is really important. It also gives social care a strong voice, both regionally and nationally, so that we can positively influence decisions affecting the sector. So our improvement plan's refreshed every year, but it's built around a medium-term vision for sustainable care, independence, social justice and economic strength. It includes a series of objectives that reflect common near-term priorities, challenges and opportunities. And the objectives are agreed annually, but there's flexibility within the plan to tackle emerging issues and to provide additional focus where it's needed. And you'll see from that graphic that both workforce and innovation are represented within the current plan. All of that is delivered within the context of a legislative framework that imposes statutory duties on each council. But really the plan's about people, and specifically about helping adults of all ages who need care and support. There's around 4.8 million adults living in the West Midlands, and around 84,000 of those who receive long-term support that's funded by their council. That funding's based on a relatively high level of dependency and a high level of need. But there's a whole lot more below that high dependency threshold who require or use both informal and formal support to help them stay independent. Projections show that we're expecting to see an increase in the number of people who are independent over the next 20 years or so, but we'll also see an increase in those with complex and high-cost care needs. And that's associated primarily with an ageing population. So helping to meet those needs in the West Midlands is a social care workforce that includes around 186,000 frontline care roles, albeit with around 17,000 vacancies currently, and an estimated 660,000 informal family carers. But even with a workforce of that size, we know that there's more care being requested than is actually being provided, and that the gap is widening. So in that context, the way that we equip and support the workforce to meet needs and help people to be independent becomes absolutely critical. If I was to ask a room of commissioners and providers of social care for a list of their top 3 concerns, I suspect most of them, if not all of them, would include workforce. And what we're seeing within the regulated care market in the West Midlands is a predominantly female workforce with an average age of 44 years, but with an increasing number of older workers, high staff vacancy and turnover rates, and relatively low skills and, of course, low pay. Very similar to what Fiona's just described in the North East. We also know that we're in an unstable economic climate, and the cost of living is pushing up the amount that's needed to achieve a decent standard of living. So recruitment and retention of care workers in that context has become hugely challenging for care providers. And while as a region we're doing some great things to encourage people into the sector, so plugging a workforce gap that's expected to rise to 45,000 by 2035 really becomes a significant challenge. And I think there comes a point where you actually have to accept that we aren't going to plug that gap through recruitment and retention alone. And if we think about the informal carer workforce, there's expected to be nationally around 1.8 million older carers by 2030. So that's people over the age of 65 by 2030 who are caring for family and friends. And a sizable number of those will be over the age of 85. And there's a growing proportion of unpaid carers who are living in poverty. Now these are people who are likely to have or to develop care and support needs in their own right. And in this context, it's difficult to see how we can continue to meet the needs of an ageing population through an already overstretched, underpaid and largely informal workforce without fundamentally changing the way that care is delivered. So while things like population growth, increased life expectancy, medical and scientific advances are all driving higher acuity and complexity of need and pushing up the demand for care, we still haven't really seen the adoption of tech-enabled ways of working at the scale that's needed to offset that demand. The King's Fund highlights in a series of reports the issues like digital exclusion, public attitudes, and user experience as issues that haven't yet really been fully or sufficiently addressed. There's no doubt that innovative solutions are out there and being developed all the time, but there's a risk that the cost of some of these will be unaffordable to the majority, in effect creating a two-tier system that leaves all but the most wealthy excluded from accessing care. And unless we end our obsession with using technology as a replacement for staff, as a way of saving money, we'll continue to meet resistance both from the workforce and from the people who rely on them. Really, this is no longer an issue about technology, it's about accepting that technology has to be part of the future of care in this country. So it strikes me that while there's still a long way to go to persuade people across the system, and that's whether it's those who draw on care and support, or commission it, or provide it, to embrace that technology and to use it to prevent, delay, reduce and enhance care, we need to be ensuring that people see technology not as a replacement, but as a way of supporting good personalised care. There's still a need to build skills and confidence in an environment where new solutions are being developed almost at a pace that's faster than allows us to adjust to what's available to us. But we need to be much, much better at listening to people and prioritising what they really want and need, rather than just what we're able to offer or develop technologically. The potential to draw insight based on data from digital solutions and interactions really is massive. But we need to be far better at sharing, collating and using that data to evaluate and direct future development and crucially to attract future investment if this is to be a sustainable sector in the future. In its recent Healthcare Horizons report, KPMG described a more inclusive approach where technology empowers individuals to prevent ill health and to intervene earlier, where technology and community assets are used to enable the workforce and to provide high quality care when it's needed. And that seems to me to be a far better template than simply looking at technology to replace people. So the alternatives really are either to rely on an increasingly outdated and inefficient model of care delivery, or to be driven too far down a technology-led rather than technology-enabled way of working. We think that the challenges for the sector are far more to do with leadership than they are to do with technology. So what can an organisation like ours, like West Midlands ADAS, do to improve the situation? Well, in a large and diverse region like the West Midlands, we've got an opportunity to share and learn from the experience of people from the 14 councils that we represent. And we run a large number of improvement networks whose work plans reflect the region's shared priorities, including workforce and technology. We've set up a digital network which has got a membership that spans social care functions and a work programme that this year has prioritised changing attitudes and behaviours towards technology and also on raising awareness and support for the digital switchover. We think this is helping providers, care workers, people who use tech-enabled care and the general public to understand both the risks and opportunities that the switchover presents. And we aim to make sure that the region is as prepared as possible for a seamless transition to digital and to take full advantage of what it can offer. Other examples of the work that we're supporting include a large-scale and multi-area digital pilot to identify and support unpaid carers, and the deployment of digital content delivery systems to older residents in care homes to stimulate people's thoughts and ideas, help maintain memory and cognitive function, and contribute to a reduction in falls and hospital admissions. We're delighted that two of our councils are piloting TSA's virtual house, of which more later, and that will raise tech awareness and confidence among staff, and we're supporting various councils within and their partners with workforce and tech culture change programs. Recognising that all of this is about people, we're delighted that co-production sits at the core of our digital development. So we've got our partnerships with TSA, with TLAP, and with the West Midlands Co-Production Advisory Group that are absolutely key to driving and making sure that development is inclusive, relevant, and affordable to people. The direction we've set is towards a cultural change, I think, that targets connectivity, skills, and inclusion, with the aim that all parts of the sector embed the use of technology in a way that enhances people's experience and outcomes, and frees up our workforce to focus on providing personalised preventative care. We hope that the approach we're taking, built around partnerships and co-production, will achieve a more inclusive, tech-enabled, and ultimately sustainable care system. And we're really looking forward to continuing this work over the coming years. I've put some links in this slide on some of the digital content that we've created within the West Midlands ADAS website. We do a lot of video work to illustrate the work that we're doing, so I would encourage you to have a look at that. But I think with that, I'll close and hand back to Fiona. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. To Tracy. Thank you. Thanks very much, Paul, and I'm sure you'll agree. I think there's a couple of things in there for us for food for thought when we come to questions. So it's around collaboration, it's around people at the heart, but it's also about scale. And actually quite sobering to hear two stories from different parts of the country, but absolutely the same in terms of the challenges that people are facing. So if I can hand you over to Tracy, who's going to take us through workforce from a housing perspective. Thank you.
Thanks. This is the most bizarre experience having these headphones on. I feel like I'm lying in a bath listening to somebody talking to me with my head under the water, but hopefully you can hear me okay. So just a word about who we are at Northern Housing Consortium first of all. So we're a membership body for social housing providers covering the whole of the North. And our membership is the councils, the housing associations, the mayoral combined authorities. And between them, our members own or manage 9 out of every 10 socially rented homes. So we feel that we can legitimately claim to be the voice of housing in the North. Just a quick look at what it is that I'm going to cover today. Okay. So I feel I need to start by saying something about the operating context for social housing providers at the moment. So you'll be aware that back in November, the courts published a judgment that little Awab Ishak in Rochdale had died as a direct result of living in poor quality housing. And that judgment absolutely shook the sector to its core. And I think it's again really cemented in everybody's minds that crucial link between housing and health. And it's actually sort of almost impossible to overstate the importance of the Awab Ishak case in terms of where social housing providers are at the moment in their thinking about the quality of their homes that they offer and addressing that as a really urgent priority. But also thinking about their whole workforce and about how they see and treat the people who live in their homes. And of course, it's also now a massive focus for government, and we know that for Michael Gove as Secretary of State, he has a deep personal commitment to this agenda. So the Awab Ishak case has undoubtedly revealed some really poor quality issues within social housing, and we know as a sector that we absolutely have to do better on that. But it's also really important that we keep focus on the appalling quality of a lot of our private rented sector, because that's a rapidly growing tenure housing and an ever increasing number of people, and with often very, very poor quality standards. So I mean, in the North, you've got 1 in 4 homes in the private rented sector that are non-decent. There's a picture on the slide there of a report that the consortium commissioned in conjunction with the Nationwide Foundation from the University of Huddersfield in 2020, and that research was done during lockdown, and it was looking at people living in predominantly the private rented sector, also some owner-occupiers as well. And it was looking at the impact that poor housing had on those people. And the findings of that research just really amplified that connection between the places that we call home, and our security and our sense of well-being. And if you haven't seen that research, I would really recommend it to you. It was called lockdown, rundown, breakdown, and what we saw was that poor quality homes absolutely grind people down, just looking at defects all day. And of course, because of the changes in working patterns, more of us are spending more time in our homes. You combine working from home with the cost of living crisis, you've also got more people spending protracted periods of time in homes that aren't well heated. And we saw very starkly in that research the direct impact that has on people's physical and mental health. And quite apart from it being awful for the people who have to live in those homes, it's not good for the public purse. So it's been estimated by the BRE that the annual cost to the NHS of poor quality housing is about 1.4 billion, and about half of that, so about 857 million of the annual NHS treatment bill, comes from defects leading to cold homes. And actually, if you improve poor housing, it has multiple benefits for society as a whole, beyond that just relate to health. So reduced energy costs, lower carbon emissions, improved educational attainment for children, local job creation opportunities. They're just a few of the benefits that can flow from improving the quality of our homes. So the role of housing as a key determinant of health is well established, but I think it's also really important to recognise that social housing is by no means just about bricks and mortar. People are absolutely at the heart of what housing does, and those people include our staff and our tenants. Housing organisations play a unique role within communities. They're true anchor institutions. They're huge local employers very often. They support the health and the well-being of residents, and they often work in partnership with health and social services to play a key role in preventative care. Social landlords increasingly house some of the most vulnerable people in society, and often people with very, very complex needs. And so our staff have increasingly complex and demanding roles. As housing providers, we have direct access to people's homes, and so we're able to reach people who perhaps aren't engaging with wider services. So this often means that our staff can be the eyes and the ears that can spot and report potential issues. So for example, gas engineers going into properties to do mandatory safety checks or any other repairs and maintenance personnel can also be trained to identify and report a range of different safeguarding issues, whether that's evidence of hoarding, poverty, domestic abuse, substance misuse, a really wide range of issues. Now, none of this is new, but I think it's important to say that the Awar Bishat case has really got social landlords focusing on core purpose and really going back to basics on some of this stuff. So it's fundamentally about recognising that unique opportunity that our workforce has to help identify a need and then keeping eyes and ears open while they're in tenants' homes and making sure that every contact counts. And there are loads of great examples of what housing is doing already in this space. Whether that's Gen 2 in Sunderland who've done prescribing of boilers for people suffering from COPD, or Mosque St Vincent's in Manchester who are delivering mental health services directly into people's homes. But if we can build on all of this great work and scale it and strengthen the partnerships between health, housing and social care in every locality, then we can achieve an awful lot more together to make sure that people can live well. And in terms of strengthening those links, the 2022 Health and Care Bill introduced the integrated care boards and the integrated care partnerships aimed at improving health and well-being across communities and creating fairer health outcomes. These ICPs have a strong focus on the wider determinants of health, including housing, which is really, really positive. So we've already seen great examples across Greater Manchester and across West Yorkshire of all of this underway, and the Northern Housing Consortium are working with the North East and North Cumbria ICS and the North East ADAS in bringing that housing voice to the housing and social care discussion across the region. Sorry, I realise I should have apologised at the start that I'm now the third North East voice, but I don't know if I do apologise for that or not. So, looking at some of the specific workforce challenges, it's worth mentioning that the Rochdale case has also sadly had a major impact on morale within social housing. So, I mean, staff across the sector are typically very caring, very passionate, they work really, really hard, they go into the sector wanting to make a difference. So this tragedy and the media coverage that has followed it, and particularly the naming and shaming of organisations, has really devastated people and made them feel very attacked and demoralised. And this really is from chief exec level down to frontline services. Several of our members have reported long-standing staff leaving the sector because of it, and then they're really struggling to backfill those posts. So this ongoing negative narrative about social housing is very much impacting recruitment and retention. As part of the social housing review and following the tragedy at Grenfell and Rochdale, we're now seeing government driving towards a professionalisation of the sector. So that's going to mean about 25,000 senior housing managers needing to obtain a professional housing qualification. I think it's fair to say that's had a mixed response. Many have welcomed it, albeit with some concerns. But of course, qualifications are not a silver bullet in themselves, and professionalisation doesn't consider culture and behaviour, and I think empathy and a passion for helping people are really key elements to delivering a vital service. So creating and driving the right culture and behaviour throughout our workforce really is a key challenge, and Paul talked about leadership, and I think it's something that we're really feeling as well. The other major workforce challenge that we face is in relation to meeting net zero targets. So the North in particular has a sort of a home energy mountain to climb. 25% of our total carbon emissions in the North come from our housing stock. We've got the oldest, coldest, leakiest homes in Europe. And the Northern Housing Consortium's Northern Housing Monitor shows that we've got 3.8 million homes which currently fall below the key energy efficiency standard of EPCC. The social housing sector has been chosen to be the trailblazer for retrofitting homes, and that's going to be a combination of insulation and moving away from fossil fuels. But there is a desperate shortage of people within the insulation and heat pump sectors. So estimates show that there are just over 700 companies in the whole of the UK registered to be able to deliver any of the green measures. So, you know, we've got 100,000 gas engineers in this country at the moment and something like 3,000 registered air source heat pump installers. So there is a huge mountain to climb to fill that skills gap. There aren't enough installers to be able to deliver net zero targets for one large local authority area at the moment, let alone the whole country. So it's a massive workforce challenge. It is, of course, a huge opportunity as well. The consortium did some work with IPPR North in 2021, and we looked to quantify the job creation potential from retrofitting the North's homes, and we found that we could create 77,000 good green jobs across the North by 2035. So getting our homes on the pathway towards net zero has been a really major focus for the Northern Housing Consortium's influence and work for the past three or more years, because it has the opportunity to deliver positive outcomes on a number of fronts. Gives you warmer, better quality homes, helps people with the cost of living crisis and helps to reduce fuel poverty, improves physical and mental health outcomes, it reduces pressure on the NHS and on adult social services, it helps tackle climate emergency, and it also helps create good jobs. So it's a no-brainer, and it is a win-win-win-win-win as far as we're concerned. I just also want to touch on the other big challenge and opportunity for us in the housing sector around the digital switchover. So many social housing residents obviously have some form of technology enabled living that enables them to live independently. And these products, as I'm sure and I hope everybody in this room knows, have traditionally used analog phone systems which are going to be switched off from 2025. So eventually all those analog systems have to be replaced or upgraded. And many housing providers are already on with that. It does worry me, the number that actually haven't really started actively thinking about that yet. So I didn't want to finish without talking about it. And I think particularly given the client group that we're talking about, it's really important how we manage this and that we get the transition absolutely right. But I think it's also important in terms of the opportunity that we don't just look at replacing like for like. So this is about looking at how can we use technology to promote independence? Who are your customers? What are their needs now and in the future? What can we do to help them live well and live independently? So this transition presents really big opportunities to access new products and services. And at a time when the NHS's capacity is an absolute premium, I think there is an opening for housing associations who can leverage this technology to essentially make our health and care system more productive. So it's really important that we have discussions where housing are at the table with health and social care as part of this, and that we can take a proactive rather than a reactive approach. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. I think that's a really insightful presentation. I think it's demonstrated the vital importance of health, housing and social care working together, not only to develop digital solutions, but to make sure that wraparound service is there to support individuals. And I suppose the thing to take away from me is how important staff's well-being is, the emotional impact that a lot of our staff have been through, not only through COVID, but through that little boy's case. Shouldn't underestimate what that does to people every day. So thank you very much for that insight, Tracy. If I can now introduce you to Lisa, who's going to take us through workforce from a supplier's perspective. Thanks, Lisa.
Hi, everyone. I feel like I should say I live in the northeast, but I've got a very Yorkshire accent, so just to keep that going. Hope everybody's okay and having a good conference. There's lots of exciting presentations and networking opportunities, but as we've all heard and we all continue to talk about, one of the key themes is the current analog to digital move that Tracy's just touched on and that we've seen in lots of presentations. So last year I also presented, and when I did, I touched on Legrand's involvement with the TAPI report and the white paper resetting the digital premium from the GGI. Both provide a comprehensive examination of how to transition to digital, and how this change again presents lots of opportunities for organisations to innovate. It also shows us how we need to ensure that transformational change positively impacts at all points of this journey, allowing that joined-up approach for communities, housing, health and care, digital data, all supported by new digital standards. Since that time, again, we've continued to see more collaborations and evidence-based papers and reports. A couple of examples are that the Scottish Government have launched its first data strategy for health and social care. The UK government also released their Transforming for a Digital Future 2022 to 25 roadmap for digital and data, which detailed their 6 missions. One of their 6 missions is the digital skills at scale, which is what we're talking about today in terms of workforce and making sure that we've all got the appropriate skills. And I appreciate that faces challenges all through in terms of recruitment. We're all seeing it in every bit of the sector. Even from a supplier perspective, we're seeing that it's getting more and more difficult to recruit the right staff and also retain the right staff. So it's absolutely key that we've got to focus on that. Yes, it is key that we focus on staff, because without everybody's buy-in, we may not just fail to get to where we want to be on time, but we may fail also to get those desired outcomes that we want. So the best thing to do, again, Tracy touched on it, that we're sort of getting closer to that 2025 point, and it's key that all of us have got a strategy and all of us have got a plan in place. But also the key focus on that is, how do we do that? How do we do that with our workforce, or the workforce that we've got, and how do we recruit that workforce? We need to understand the digital maturity of our workforce. Do our workforce also understand the strategy, the bigger picture? And do our workforce understand the changes required and the positive impact, that the benefits that digital will bring to their organisation and ultimately to the service users? We need to look at the skills gap, and we also need to plan how we address that. Sorry. It's key that we return all our workforce and arm our frontline staff with the tools that are needed to empower them, by ensuring that they have the right skills to better assess, prescribe and tailor technology around the person and their needs, to ultimately deliver that true technology-enabled care. We need to remove the fear of technology, remove the fear of change. All of us find change and technology a bit daunting. In a lot of the presentations, we've heard lots of different things about digital connections, digital protocols, and I do understand that sometimes it is a bit daunting and sometimes can become a bit confusing. So we need to remove that fear and make sure that people do truly understand what's happening with that. We need to support the individual by means of data collection and interoperability, to allow the organisation to provide a more proactive service and provide a more evidence-based outcomes that drive that growth and success that we're all looking for as an organisation. Technology should be used to help and support and improve efficiencies. It's not there to replace human contact. Technology and human contact should work hand in hand. As a technology provider, Legrand Care know that change in any aspect is daunting for many of us. Therefore, we understand the importance to design and develop technology that, from an operational perspective, is uncomplicated. It needs to be easy to use, and we take a lot of that into consideration when we're designing our products. Also, as a supplier, we want to support you as an organisation in terms of getting your staff to where they need to be, getting that digital skill set up to where it needs to be. So we, as a supplier, are very keen on supporting you with your training needs. Every supplier has a responsibility to ensure that everybody knows what the equipment and the technology does. Otherwise, you'll just never get the best of it, and you'll never be able to use that to enhance your service. We need to remove that fear. We need to share insights and collaborations reports with all our workforce. Information and knowledge promotes empowerment through understanding. People have got to understand what we're all trying to achieve. They've got to understand the impact that it has and the outcomes that we want to achieve. A more recent collaboration that Legrand have been involved in, which most of you are probably aware of, is the Tech Action Alliance, which is a great piece of work, again, that has engaged with national care organisations, people who draw on care, public, private and national care organisations, voluntary sectors, local government, NHS and many more umbrella bodies involved in the delivery of personal care, technology-enabled systems. It also explores the live and learnt experience, which Sam's going to talk more about and we've heard a little bit about earlier. We all need to work in partnership to deliver a truly person-centred and quality of care that is affordable. Too many times this type of collaboration is not shared through organisations. I suppose some organisations were a bit guilty of this. Not everybody is aware of all these papers and all these collaborations that are happening. It's important that all the workforce are aware of this and truly understand that bigger picture. It's key to getting the buy-in and people understanding the importance of their role in delivering this. We hear and we see for ourselves that there are workforce shortages. It's a challenge that a lot of us are faced with. which again reinforces why we need to value our workforce. It's key that organisations understand the existing skill set. We need to invest in our workforce, provide the tools and training required to get your workforce to a level required to ensure they feel empowered and confident when assessing and prescribing technology. It's not about technology fitting around the person. It's not about fitting the person around the technology. It's having that true understanding of what that technology is capable of and how that can support that person. And without that understanding, the prescription of that is never going to be right. It's key. Share information of the bigger picture. Yeah, absolutely. The work that we all do on a day-to-day basis is important. But ultimately, how can that technology evolve the service and support that we offer as an organisation? If you take the time to do all of this and more, it will result in workforce retention. Staff feel valued, they understand their role, and they want to continue to do it. They understand the importance and the difference of their role plays, which enables them to also, in turn, develop and grow those partnerships which are mutually beneficial to all key stakeholders: housing, health and social care, and the service user. All of us play a key role, and to get the best from this, we all need to understand the part we play and embrace and push forwards a more joined-up approach of that service delivery. As I say, as a designer and supplier and solutions provider, we are keen to get involved with organisations in terms of supporting your training needs. We will do that with you. We'll work hand in hand with you in terms of developing a training programme with you. It is so important. And that's me done. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And again, I think takeaway for us are around that skill sets, making sure that we're constantly supporting staff to maintain and have new skill sets. And also the importance of collaboration is coming out really strongly for us this morning as well. So if I can introduce you to Samantha, who's going to take us through the virtual house, which has been mentioned a couple of times this morning. As I said, it's in the North East, it's in the West Midlands, and we're really delighted just to show you the product that we've got here. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I feel a little bit left out, I have to say, because I don't live in the North East, I live in Scotland, so I'm the odd one out here today. I'm Samantha Davis, I'm the Workforce Development Manager for TSA, and everybody's been talking about the statistics, and the State of Adult Social Care and Workforce Report in 2022, which was published in October, highlighted some really concerning statistics around the recruitment and retention of our workforce. Vacancy rates rose by 10.7%, or rose to 10.7%, an increase of 52% in just 12 months. Turnover rates remained high at 29%, and by 2035 it's estimated that we're potentially going to need an additional 480,000 people working in social care just to keep pace with demand. With the increase in demand for our services and the requirement to support people with more complex needs, the report highlights that investing in learning and development is essential. It identifies that organisations that continue to invest in learning and development of their workforce reduce their staff turnover by 31.7%. It states that the data clearly indicates that investing in your workforce works. It plays a pivotal role in the build of the ambition of the implementation initiative set out in the People at the Heart of Care white paper, which sets the foundations to stabilise our essential workforce. So, understanding these challenges, how can TSA support you? Fiona has been, and Paul have been talking about the Building ITEC Know-How, which is an immersive learning tool. It's developed from 3 different levels, so we've got advocate, practitioner and expert, and as an advocate it starts to demystify what tech is. Through the course of the 3 levels we start to build an understanding of needs, of risks, of consequences and the limitations and constraints of the technologies. We start to explore things like ethics and safeguarding and the role that they play in technology-enabled care. Oops. Each of the levels is supported with an immersive learning scenario. So it isn't just about giving people the information, it's about giving them a safe place to explore that. So as an advocate, you get to explore this virtual house, see how to engage with it. As a practitioner in the scenarios, we start to explore what does that assessment process look like? How do we identify the needs? How do we identify the risks? And then start to begin to marry the solutions that can help to manage those. As the expert, the scenario gives the user, the learner, the experience of understanding what somebody's needs are, but they then have to identify what the solutions are and in which area of the property that they're needed. This provides a safe environment for people to learn, to build confidence in prescribing technology-enabled care. Creating an environment for tech to thrive means that our workforce need to have the right knowledge, the right skills and behaviours to ensure that the provision of good quality services. In addition to enhancing the core competencies required of the role, we need to arm them with the right skills and behaviours to manage some of the more challenging situations, some of the more challenging aspects of their role, and also some of the aftermath of some of those challenging situations by supporting the mental well-being of our workforce. We've refined our training and workshops to focus not only on the core competencies, but to enhance and develop the softer skills that are required, whether that's ensuring our workforce are communicating effectively with different questioning and listening skills, or developing the skills when handling more challenging calls or difficult conversations. These workshops can be delivered directly to your organisation, or where organisations have smaller numbers of staff, then staff are invited to join our group sessions. Learning and development shouldn't just be considered a tick box exercise. It's something that happens every couple of years or when a need arises. As I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, the Skills for Care report identified that organisations that invested in the learning and development of the staff increased the retention by more than 30%. Our learning journeys offer the opportunity to provide ongoing training and support to your workforce, whether that's to enhance the skills and behaviours of your team, or whether you're transforming your organisation and services. We'll work with you to understand your objectives and create a workforce development strategy to achieve your goals. Through the TAPI project, we're working with 6 partner organisations to understand the needs of the housing sector when it comes to understanding and implementing tech. And through these workshops, we've identified 3 key objectives. Aesthetically, the virtual house needed to be better suited to the housing sector rather than a private property. So we're now developing 2 different versions so that as a person enters the virtual house, they can actually choose whether they enter a single story, like a bungalow style, or whether it's a multi-level property. The second was that it needed to incorporate technologies and solutions like door entry systems and property units, again, more suited to the housing sector. And the third is that we wanted to create an assessment tool. So we want to take the virtual house to the next level. And rather than being prescriptive in, if this happens, have this solution, it's about guiding people and educating people to consider as Lisa was saying, it's about understanding the limitations, but also the capacity of the different solutions. The assessment tool is also going to be aligned to the Care Act of the 4 Nations. We need to think now about the long-term workforce requirements with workforce planning, so that we now know so that we're going to increase capacity to ensure that we have enough people with the right skills and knowledge to meet the anticipated and increased demands. Thank you.
Thanks, Samantha. And I must say, one of the things that really was of value to the North East with this programme is Samantha's point about it doesn't recommend a particular supplier. It talks about risk and then it matches it to a technology solution, which I think brings us back to some of the comments we've heard this morning about solution first and then see how we can actually support people and wrap service around them. So apologies from the chair, I've done dreadfully this morning. We're running out of time for questions, but if there are one or two burning questions, more than happy to take them for the panel. If not, I'm sure we're around for the rest of the day if people want to catch up. Is there anything anyone wants to ask anyone on the panel just before we close? No, I think you've done an amazing job, panel. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your attendance this morning. Thank you.